Data Storytellers. This is Laszlo here, and today on the show I have with me Nina Monckton. Nina is the head of data at the Just Group, and today we are going to touch on some exciting data-related topics. So first of all, Nina, welcome on the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to diving into some of these areas that we already talked about when we were not on the air. And those people who are not familiar with you, so you are listed in the Data IQ 100, I think, in 2021. So a lot of our audience members will be probably familiar with you, but those who are not, what brought you into the world of data? What brought you to this role now over at Just Group?
Well, what brought me into the role of data, I guess, was my initial career. I started out working as a statistician. So that was my route into data. And then since then, I've sort of worked my way through to managing data teams, looking after entire data departments, and really, helping organizations to transform how they use data and what they're doing with data. So that's been my career in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so always, and I suppose I'm quite a nosy person, which helps when it comes to data.
Mm-hmm. So being a nosy person, being genuinely curious about truth,
Yes.
right? A lot of people actually end up being senior data executives at larger companies, following that intuition, following that call. And you worked at the NHS, so a lot of our audience will be North American. They might not even know what the NHS is, but you were in a leadership development program there, and you actually became the chief data officer for the Business Service Authority, part of that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
How did that happen? Because that was quite a journey over 13 years.
Yeah, I suppose it was mostly to do with the data that we held. So just for your American audience, the NHS is it's a national health service. So essentially it covers what happens to people in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland when it comes to their health.
Our US audience might even ask, like, what's a national health service?
Yeah. So it covers everything really, from birth through to anything in between. So whenever you get ill in the UK, you can go and see a GP, and it's free. There are some charges for some things like eyesight, so glasses, dentistry. There's charges for some of that, but most of it is free. So if you need to go to hospital, you can go to hospital. It's all covered by, it's essentially a tax scheme. So so the Business Services Authority is an organization that essentially makes a lot of transactional, sort of financial transactional activities for the NHS. So two of the things they do, one is they pay dentists, the other is they pay pharmacists. Now, pharmacy is a huge amount of the NHS bill. So when I worked there, it was in excess of £9 billion a year. And it's, it grows every year because more and more people use drugs, and drugs get more expensive, and new drugs come online, and all the rest of it. So there was a lot of scope there for understanding, really how that money was being spent, and where there were opportunities to save money. And so the role kind of grew. I was mostly working in the dentistry side of it, and dentistry side was quite advanced in what it was doing with its data. And the reason it was advanced was because it was holding a more granular level of data than the pharmacy part was. So I said, well, really, we're throwing away a lot of data that we're processing, but we're not then keeping it to do anything useful with it. And I spent a lot of time basically talking to very senior people, because I wasn't that senior in the organization at the time, saying to them, look, there's real opportunity here. We should think beyond the because there were lots of concerns about governance, information governance. And I said, yeah, but we should really think beyond that and look at, you know, what's the value of having this data at a more granular level. So eventually we gave it a go. So we managed to get hold of some of the data that was at patient level, and then we started to, you know, I got some data scientists to start looking at it, and we started running some hypotheses through around, you know, what might be going on, and we really focused in on the fraud and error angle. So we were really looking at, you know, how could people be manipulating the system, or would there be waste in the system? And we did find we found a lot of things that were going on that where we could be saving a lot of money. So then what we started to do was to look at, okay, so how can we build this insight to show the people who are managing the budgets where they're losing money, and then it's over to them to have the conversations with their clinicians to say, you know, look, you're prescribing an expensive drug when you could be prescribing a generic one that's cheaper, or it looks like you're over prescribing to a particular patient. So there was lots and lots of insight then that we were able to sort of reveal. And then that was what we were doing, was building out that service to provide that insight back to the NHS so they could then use it to save lots of money, essentially. So that was what I was doing at the NHS, and it was really it was quite a complex project because there were so many stakeholders involved, and if you think about it, you've got the sort of the government department who ultimately are responsible for the funding and, you know, the development of the clinicians and the relationship with the people on the ground who are managing those clinicians. Then you've actually got the people who are managing the local activity, and then you've got the people who are delivering it. So it was quite a layered and complex stakeholder environment. So there were quite a few challenges along the way. Some of them quite you know, not things that I would have realized. So for example, there were quite a few businesses who had established themselves because the NHS likes to have data, and because it struggles to get hold of the data and the people in the organisation to do things. There were people who'd built services that they were selling back to the NHS data, but they were packaging it up and adding value to it. And then of course I came along with a new product that gave them a lot of more detailed information than they currently had, that was available to them for free, because we were essentially paid for by the central NHS funding to say, here's lots of data that you can use and it's available to you. And so that upset quite a few organisations. So I hadn't really you know, considered how much sway as well they would have with politicians. And yeah, there were people who were trying to set up businesses, and I did get quite a bit of yeah, well, I mean, we were trying to do the right thing. We were coming at it from a, you know, we've got this data, we want to help the NHS to get to it quickly and to make decisions quickly, and yeah, so that surprised me somewhat. But you know, it was a very successful project, and it released a lot of data that wasn't previously available, and you know, and now there's a lot more open data around prescribing as well, which just wasn't there before. So all sorts of groups of people benefit from it, you know, mental health, child mental health, diabetes, you know, there were so many groups that got value from it.
Very interesting. Actually, this is so it's so funny that you mentioned that, oh, you kind of ruffled some feathers, and you seem to be stepping on toes, even though from your perspective, all you were doing is revealing the truth that was there, you know, bringing in services and capabilities that were enabling the organization to see reality. And apparently it's quite a surprise that you get a lot of pushback from that. And as a leader, that's like an interesting responsibility and challenge of, okay, what do I do here? How should I position myself? Like, how assertive should I be, or how humble should I be by actually maybe taking a step back and listening and maybe like tactfully deploying truth where it's well received. What were your experiences kind of forming here? Because I know, and we can talk about like how you then went to AXA and the Just Group, but from these experiences, how did your conception of what a data leader should actually do and how she should really embody some of those qualities transformed over that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lesson that I learned as a result of that was the stakeholder engagement, the stakeholder analysis, and maybe working through, you know, some of these scenarios. And I think what was unfortunate was it kind of became a growing noise that then impacted the senior civil servants, as opposed to me sort of knowing about it first and then being able to brief other people on how that might play out, and also, you know, for them to have the opportunity to give a bit of direction on it. So I mean, in the end, they did support us, because ultimately what they want to do is enable the NHS to be able to do as much as it can without having to rely on paying other organisations to do it. But yeah, there were a lot of bumps in the road. So I suppose one of the things is, you know, be resilient to that. You can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs, I suppose. There were, you know, yes, there were a few business models broken along the way, but I think, you know, like with any disruption, those businesses adapted and they moved and they did different things, and actually probably benefited in the long run from it, because there was much better data available. So whatever they were doing, they could still carry on doing it. I think it was just the initial shock. So yeah, and I suppose that goes back to all organizations in how do you prepare for change? How do you prepare the people who are going to be impacted for that change? And yeah, unfortunately, sometimes you will miss groups of people and need to go back and do something to sort of pick up the to get them back, you know, back on track and up to speed and understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it. But yeah, that happens, whatever, doesn't it? It's one of those things when you're doing change.
Yeah, and I actually see like an interesting analogy forming here, maybe because we're talking about the NHS, but it's almost like you said that this is disruptive. So interestingly enough, truth in a large organization tends to be disruptive. Well, what does that expose? That this fact that you find some information, you drive some insights from it, which reflect the truth. And then when you try to deploy it in the organization, you get pushback. It's disruptive. What that means is that whatever the modus operandi was before was not based on truth. So it's almost like when you bring, and this is natural, it's like basically human nature, that personal perspectives and personal interests start to play a role instead of objective truth. It's just, you know, how societies work. And basically you as a data professional, you come in as the physician who have a different perspective, and ultimately you need to sell that, you know, because the medicine a lot of times is bitter, and it's almost like it's your responsibility to make sure that the organization takes that medicine and can ultimately be healed from that disease of not working in a data-driven or data-centered way. So did you find the need to sell this, like actively sell it? Because even if you think about a surgeon, you know, when you need a heart surgery, sometimes the surgeon will need to explain why you need it, why you need that urgently, how that will help you, and get you to actually comply with something that's a huge thing and go under anesthesia, all that stuff. I don't know where this analogy breaks down, by the way, but I think it kind of holds up.
Well, I suppose it's a team sport, isn't it? Data can do so much, and I suppose going back to the patient analogy, really, if I was to, you know, if you were to be told every single thing that is wrong with you or might be wrong with you, you'd probably be quite overwhelmed and think, oh my God, you know, I don't know where to start. And I suppose that's part of the art of, you know, how do we as data leaders help people to act on what we're telling them. So with the NHS example, I mean, it was very much okay. So there will be various programs that will be running as part of the NHS plan, which will look at particular illnesses that they're trying to reduce, or awareness, or anything else. So you look at, okay, well, how can I support those? Because if I can use data to help support those aims, then I know there's that wrapper, going back to the team sport bit, there's the wrapper around it to support those people that need to be doing something to do something. And I suppose that was part of, okay, how do we build the success here? Because the success is only really driven by what people do with the information you give them and how they use that. So sort of partnering with other parts of the NHS to say, okay, how can we help? So the child mental health one is a classic. There was a group of people looking at that. There was quite a lot of focus on it. So we said to them, well, what can we provide to help people to do what you want them to do? And that was one of the ways we looked at it. So yeah, I'd say team sport, because you drop lots of information into an organization and they can just become completely overwhelmed by it and not know what to do with it. So having that, right, let's work with you, let's look at your priorities, let's look at how we help you deliver on those priorities, is part of it, is really going to drive that success, isn't it? Too much is going to do anything for anybody. It's getting it focused and in a supported way. So I receive this, I know what to do with it.
And then did data become a strategic priority then over at the NHSB SA? So
yeah, it did because I think, and a lot of this, and again, this goes back to how do you get interest, excitement around the data? And actually internally, there wasn't that much excitement. I think people were worried about all this new data, and or putting it in one place, and they were genuinely concerned. But when people from outside started to use it and started to talk about the data and how they were using it and what benefits it was bringing to their particular program, once that momentum started and you've got your people who are benefiting talking about it, it's very difficult then to say, actually, no, we don't see the benefit of this anymore. So same probably with the role I'm in now. The part of the business I'm working with, they're really excited about what we're doing, and they're talking about how they're using data, how they're using the insight that they're getting, and that's much more powerful than me as a person who works in data saying, you need to focus on data, you need to spend money on data, because they can really sell it from their perspective, which goes back to the point we were talking about when we spoke yesterday about engagement and how you use stakeholders, because they tell the story as much as data leaders need to tell the story.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, okay, you need to get people excited, which is like crucially important. Even if we think about like selling anything, again, sales does have this bad rep and these negative connotations around it, because a lot of times we still think about sales as, I don't know, like a ready used car salesperson from the 70s trying to push like an old Chevy. But that's actually false. This is not how sales works. In fact, as a professional, you need to sell ideas all the time. It's more like a responsibility, and I actually see people being averse to that responsibility, and they say that I don't want to sell things, but you do have to. I mean, if you want to, if let's say you have something valuable, in this case, it's truth really that you can drive from different capabilities that the organization would not have access to. You still have to sell that truth, and you break through a lot of resistance. And as you said, like getting the excitement is crucial. So during these, even if you think about like small businesses pitching to investors, we know this space, and basically what you want to do in the psychological journey is first create curiosity, then that transforms into intrigue, then that transforms into interest and want. So that there is that arc, which after you've earned that interest and that excitement, then you can talk about, how do I make you confident in my ability to deliver on this? So there's that journey, and ultimately what we're doing is moving from excitement to trust. So basically, from your perspective, how important was this specific element of building trust after you got them excited to actually deliver on some of those expectations, maybe over deliver on what they anticipated, and build trust in order to become a trusted advisor? Was that something that you did intentionally? Was that something that played a crucial role?
So, with the project I'm working on at the moment, we've had very much business, the people who are going to be using the end product, very much center of the project, involved in the project. So they understand everything about the complexities of, how do you get data from over here through this sausage machine out to the other side that's in a format that we can use it. And they've come on the journey with us. So they've been through the experiences with us as well. And I think from that perspective, they've got a lot more of an understanding of, the capabilities, because we've solved problems together. We've gone through so much together that I think it would be hard now for them not to be able to trust us. So I definitely think there's real value in, bringing people into the experience, bringing them into the team to see, how it all works and what's actually happening under the bonnet. Yeah, I mean, I suppose in a way it's quite nice with data, in that, if you can prove the numbers add up, there's one way to gain some trust, but also being able to demonstrate that data is safe is another thing that that people are particularly worried about. And one of the things that we've been looking at is, okay, well, how do we make sure that we anonymize data by default, so that once it's gone from its secure environment through to a reporting analytics layer, people can't see an individual. So there's lots of ways. I mean, there's committees, I've been to numerous boards and committees to talk about, let them have a pick over the design, what could go wrong, and people always ask how things might go wrong. Can somebody get in? Can they steal the data? And being able to demonstrate, no, this is how we're securing this is what we're doing. So again, I suppose it goes back to team sport, doesn't it? It's that ensuring that everybody who's got in your organization, who's got oversight of particular parts of it, that you are engaging them at some point and making sure that they're really comfortable with what's going on. And I spent a lot of time talking to people, warming them up about, this is what we're doing, this is when we're going to need your support, what do you need us to do to be able to help you make a decision? So yeah, I think as a data leader, you spend a lot of time engaging with people to check, because in my early career, I got derailed by data protection officers on a few occasions, which then ended up as if you've gone too far down a project and then you're having the standoff with the DPO, it's not great. So you want to take the DPO on the journey as well. So yeah, there's a lot of people to take on the journey.
Mm-hmm. And also boils down to data maturity, I imagine. When you moved to AXA, so AXA Health, you spent just over a year there. Were they in a different state of data maturity than the NHS? And then basically you entered into a role as head of data strategy. Was there already a data strategy that you had to run, or did you have to build it from scratch?
So there has been a data strategy at AXA. So I suppose the main difference between public and private sector is that, and this is going to sound really awful, but it is easier to make a business case and get big investment, particularly if you're in a larger sort of national organization. So I guess that that's one thing, and the way you get funding, of course, public and private organizations is different. So there was a data strategy there. It wasn't perhaps being implemented in the way it was supposed to, and I guess that there'd been a lot of shareware created that was very, very broad. And so what I did when I got there was I said, well, look, let's try and narrow this down to what things can we start to look at that are really going to help us accelerate what we're trying to do here. And again, because it's a health company, and because we have GDPR in this country in Europe, where we're looking at how we keep data safe. There's also with health data, there's the added complexities of what the doctors are allowed to do with data, which does make things slightly more tricky. So the first thing to look at there was really, okay, what's our strategy for making sure everyone's comfortable that we're compliant, because that was where they were at. They were slightly concerned about that. So that was really where I spent a lot of my focus, and also in building up their data science team. So they had a couple of data scientists there. So I was working with them to look at, well, where are our use cases? How do we build up that data science backlog? And sort of coming at it from two angles, really. So you've got the sort of the higher analytics bit. There's some value to be dropped here, but also, okay, we need to sort out the real fundamentals, so everybody's comfortable that we're going to use this technology to get this data into a state where we can really start driving some value from it. And I think that showing you could have some drops of value helped to make the argument that it's really worth us sorting out this big problem over here. So that was where we were there with AXA, and then moved on to Just.
So what happened there? So what is your mandate now? What was your mandate when they hired you? Why did they hire you? And then what was the grand project that you needed to embark on?
So Just is going through an awful lot of transformation at the moment. So digital transformation, and therefore part of that is obviously needing a good data strategy as well, because you can't do digital without good data. Mm-hmm. So I was brought in to basically do data transformation for them and build out their data capabilities. So we've made a good start. We've got an enterprise platform. We are looking at how we build out more of our data capabilities. But again, we're looking at everything from how we look after and govern data through to the use cases for machine learning and what we're doing there. So most of what we're doing, the data platform is at the center of, with lots of services hanging off of that. So it's very exciting because it's quite a diverse. It's quite a diverse organisation. There are different parts of it that do different things. So everyone's looking at using, like in any organisation, everyone's looking at using data in a different way. And every time you talk to somebody, they've got an interesting new use case that they want to bring to life. So it's really nice to be able to deliver on that for people. That's the thing that is exciting. But I'm not going to lie, we've had challenges with recruitment. I think everyone's having challenges with recruitment at the moment. That's been quite hard. So we've worked with a partner to help us get to where we've got to at the moment. We're now looking at what do we do about continuing to build our data capabilities. So we're looking at boot camps, how we can maybe encourage some people internally to move across to data roles. What we're going to do next year, how do we attract graduates, how are we going to support those graduates to get the skills that they need to work with us in the team. So that's been the new challenge, I suppose, this year. Is actually building those skills with the people, with your hands tied behind your back when it comes to recruitment.
So recruitment is a very interesting subject here, because Again, it boils down to sales. It boils down to, you need to sell your function. You need to sell the opportunity to the person. You got to make it genuinely attractive. You have to make it exciting. And then again, there's no way around having to communicate that the right way. So one aspect of sales, if we think about, let's say you think about selling anything, well, you need good leads to sell to. So you have to know who you are targeting first. Then you need to have some volume of that pool of people. And then you got to be able to convert these individuals into, in this case, your data scientists. So one part of it, of course, is that you can work with recruiters and they can deliver more people to you. But then you having to convert those individuals, well, it's up to you. So what do you think are the keys to make the opportunity attractive? Do they, and I would be curious about maybe your take on this as a data leader. Like, do they buy into you as a leader? Is it about the exciting opportunities that you give them? Is it about the benefits? Like, what have you observed to be the keys to be successful in this? And I know that no one has the silver bullet, because if you did, then you wouldn't have the challenge.
So one of the interesting things that I uncovered quite a while back, and I don't know if it's still true today, because I'll be honest with you, Laz, I've been lacking in CVs at the moment. But one of the really interesting things that I saw was, when we advertised roles that were at a more mature level with a decent salary, we got fewer applicants. When we advertised a role with a career progression, we got loads of applicants. So when we advertised for I think it was a junior data scientist, we were inundated with people, many of whom could have quite easily just applied to be a data scientist, because they had the right skills, they had the right qualifications. So that was interesting. So I do think that many data professionals are looking for career progression, career development and skills development, and actually, if you can offer that, and you can demonstrate that you're working on modern technology, you're willing to train people to use that technology, I think that's a real winner. I suppose the problem then comes is, how much time do you have to train those people up to get up to speed with what you need them to do, which is where partners do come in useful, and your sort of contractor skills. But yeah, I think the opportunity to grow is one of the big things that gets people to apply. That, and I know a lot of people now prefer to be remote working. That's another trend that we've seen, which actually is fine, particularly I think for data engineering type people who need to be really concentrating. I don't have a problem with that at all. So yeah, I think there's that flexibility and that growth. I'm joining you. Are you going to invest in me as an individual? Because if you can demonstrate you're going to do that, I think you're more onto a winner to attract good people.
So you mentioned growth and improving skills specifically. So what do you observe to be the critical skills for that kind of individual right now, data science people? Because there are all kinds of skills that they can acquire. It can be technological, it can be more on the soft skills side of things, communications, sales. So what do you think, first of all, are very, very useful and impactful for the data capability in the organization? And also, what are they interested in, and where would they like to grow? Do you have any insights on that?
So previously, data scientists I've recruited have been quite excited about the technology. What technology are they using? That's been quite key. I think one of the key skills for a successful data scientist is curiosity, and how that person gets to the root cause of what is it that you're trying to do. And it's a bit beyond that, to the point of, what is it that you're trying to do, and what can I do to get you beyond what you're trying to do. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well here, but so you can listen to someone and hear what they want to do and build them that, or you can really dig into what's the problem, really dig into why are you trying to do this, and then come back with a solution for them, which might not be what they think it is, because many people, as us data people know, people will come to you with their solution. This is what I think I need, and it takes a really good analyst or data scientist to go back and say, all right, just tell me how you do this on a daily basis. What's happening? Where are your pain points? And sort of look a bit more holistically and understand that problem, to go back with something. Okay, I'm going to build you something else because this is what you actually need to be able to do what you need to do. And I think those are the skills. If you've got those skills, the data science skills can be built on. That's the bit, it's that, what's it, hire for attitude, train for the role. It is really that grasp of getting under the skin of what is the business problem here. And I've seen that done really, really well. The partner that we've just been working with, I mean, they spoke to this one guy. It was just amazing. I mean, he spoke to so many people from across the organization, and just got it. I know what you're trying to do. Yep, I get that. Yep. And then then pull that together and said, this is what you need to be able to do that. And these are all the use cases that will be able to be. And that's such a skill, because you can be very good technically and just not have that at all.
I think you definitely hit the spot there, and said that you don't know if you're explaining yourself properly. I think you explained it amazingly, because this is what we've been seeing all around. First of all, CVs are in high demand. It's really difficult to find the right people. It's really difficult to hire them. When you hire them, they are expensive, and it's very difficult to retain them. So you have this amazingly and astoundingly costly capability in the business that can do so much. The potential is vast, especially because the technology piece is just getting more and more capable. It's expanding. It's in a lot of ways, actually, the technology is becoming more optimal, even on the cost side of things. So there are all kinds of things that you could do. But what we see is that this potential is not being fulfilled because of it's a skill gap with the data scientists. And that skill gap is not that they don't know the right algorithms or they don't have the competence to work with technology. I mean, that's what they do. A lot of times these people are PhDs, and that's all they know. And exactly that ability to ask the right questions, it's almost like, why is this not being taught? You can't get there's no business school that teaches this course specifically. There's no targeted education in this field, even though the benefits are huge. Imagine an organization spending literally millions, usually tens of millions every year in these people, and they're bleeding from all kinds of holes in this, because they are losing talent. They are building the wrong solutions that they are not being used, that damages the trust that's being put in the data capabilities. And only if they knew to ask the right questions, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is a real skill. And also that I suppose trust in themselves, because it's a bit, ask someone what they want and they'll say a faster horse when you could build them a car. And I think some of that as well, what I get frustrated with is this assumption that everyone wants to click buttons on a dashboard. And I sort of challenge my teams and say, well, do they really? Or could you bob them an email that says, you need to look at this today because it's gone out of range, or whatever. And I think that's part of challenging how we work. What's the right solution for that person? Yeah, the dashboard might look really pretty, but actually, what are they trying to get to? How do they get there really quickly? And that's I do think that's a real skill that and that kind of skill comes with experience, which is part of the problem when you're looking at a roles that are so new, that are attracting younger people to them, is that approach, they haven't got that experience yet to be able to really think about the consequences of doing things this way rather than that way. And no, it doesn't provide them with a dashboard, but do they really want to be fiffing around with a dashboard when they could just have the information directly when they need to look at it and not have to look at it? So yeah, it is interesting. It is really interesting. I often think that if you could just put maybe a process re-engineer, a data scientist, and a business analyst together, and just say, just go off and do marvelous things, they would absolutely solve most world problems.
Absolutely, and it's
just
funny
let them go. Just let them go.
No, totally, and you mentioned that not everyone would like to press buttons on the dashboard, but why is that the assumption? And it really comes from, as you said, that we need to find a way to change how individuals think. It's not just data scientists, by the way, it's a universal issue. There's this guy called Chris Voss. I don't know if you've heard of him. He used to be the lead negotiator for the FBI, and he wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, which is ultimately a negotiation book. It's about how to negotiate. And you think about negotiation, it's kind of like a bartering thing. How do I, I don't know, manipulate someone into giving me a better price? Not at all. Again, that's completely the wrong assumption, because you make these deals all the time during your smallest interactions, during your average day as well. When you try to negotiate a deal, basically deals get made when both parties like the deal. We both like the deal. We're both happy with what the deal will give us. It's like a mutually beneficial thing. But how do you get that? Well, it's about finding the real interest of the other person and then kind of giving up your preferences. Maybe even temporarily, it's important that you like the deal too, but really putting yourself into the other person's shoes, applying empathy. I know it's being mentioned all the time, empathy, empathy, empathy. It's kind of like a buzzword, but if you actually understand what empathy is and what it can do for you when you try to look at the world through the eyes of the person that you're trying to influence, that would actually allow you guys to find something real. Because if you don't do that, you can have the assumption that I need to build a dashboard. They can kind of just go along with what you're saying because they don't understand what they need either. And if you don't put the work in and it's not informed based on some real world experience as well, then you end up building the wrong solution to the wrong people. So that's really interesting, and I would love to dig into this a little bit more. Maybe I can do it in another time. But I'm also trying to be conscious of the clock here. But do you have any other insights around this?
I think part of it is to do with the way people are taught when it comes to data. It is very much, there's a very heavy bias on presentation, data visualization, and maybe that feels a bit scary for somebody who's been taught it's all about making things look good and telling the story. Data storytellers, telling the story with data. To move ourselves away from that, it goes back to trust again, doesn't it? Do I trust that? Do I need both things? If I think about my bank, I want to be able to log in and see what's happening in my account, but I also don't want to rely on me looking in and going every day, oh my god, that looks like it's fraudulent. I want to rely on them to ping me to tell me if they think something's fraudulent. So there's a kind of dual thing going on here, isn't there, around what's the best way to do this, which it takes it out of the build a dashboard sphere.
Exactly. And it's such a good point that data storytelling, when we talk about data storytelling, we actually specifically say that it's not about visualizing data sets. That, by the way, that's not a story. A story always has a protagonist. That's very, very many people miss it. It's not a story if I'm talking about abstractions. It becomes a story when there is someone at the center of the events. And let's say when your bank just gives you raw data or even just raw information, that's so different from actually them telling you how that information influences you. Because when I talk about how the information influences you and how that's relevant to you, it just became a story because it's a story about you. right? And
Mm.
that's actually the great challenge. And how you do this, by the way, to translate it again into the world of the data scientist, is asking the right questions. So negotiation too, it's about finding the actual interests, pain points, desires through asking the right questions. And it's a whole art. It's both an art and a science. So really good stuff, Nina. I would love to, again, talk more about this, and maybe in the short thought leadership piece that we will do with you, we can explore it a little bit more. But before we land the plane, which unfortunately we'll have to do soon, what would be your personal recommendations for the aspiring data leaders of the future? The decade of data is upon us, and I think you already mentioned a bunch of things, but if you had to summarize maybe a few key insights from your experience, what would be your top recommendations, top tips for the leaders of the future?
Ooh, so my top tip is understand your business strategy and make sure that everything you do is supporting that strategy and everyone knows how it's supporting that strategy. That's my recommendation.
Amen. I think everyone can take this and map it onto their own career and business processes.
I think the other bit of advice I would give is reach out to other people who are in similar roles, talk to them. Most people are experiencing the same pain points. Someone will work out how to solve it, and then you all learn from it. I think the data community is a really sharing community, and benefit from that. Take the benefit from it. Those would be my two pieces of advice.
Absolutely. Actually, even with the data storytellers, without plugging anything, because the podcast, again, it's not sponsored. It's just we do it because we like it and it's fun. But when we actually work with you guys in a meaningful way, that's what we found that you get the most value from, which is bringing you together and then sharing experiences in a meaningful way and around the right subjects. So really enjoyed this conversation, Nina. Thank you for your insights, and we hope to see you soon again.
Look forward to it. Thank you.